Probably my local one, just because I can play better there because I'm used to it and I kind of know how it works.
Yeah.
We played Tobacco Road, which is kind of a nationally famous one that's here in North Carolina. And it was really cool, but also it's really difficult, right? So then you play bad and you hate yourself. You doubt your value as a human.
I find with golf, you're really not playing against other people. You're just playing against yourself.
Yeah, I'm not worried about how other people are doing or comparing myself to them. But when you play worse than you kind of know you can do or something, you know?
Yeah, completely. So, from my years as an educator, I loved the difficult students.
Right.
I absolutely loved to try to figure out how their brains worked and everything. If you could sum up your school years in a couple of adjectives, what would you say?
Frustration, unhappiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are probably the two.
And how did that make you feel of like your value you gave yourself or your self worth, like growing up?
Yeah. I mean, low, right? So everybody, including my parents, says, you're going to fail. And with good intentions, right? They're worried you're going to fail. They're trying to help you succeed. They're worried you're going to fail. So they tell you you will if you can't, learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what you're told. Um, and I can't, so that means I'm going to fail. So yeah, it was definitely, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, I'll show you, I'm going to, I'm better than you think I am. I'm like, if every adult tells you that you're going to fail, that you don't have what it takes, I believed them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my parents sort of had a rule: if the teacher's unhappy with you, we're unhappy with you. You got to figure it out. They're never wrong. We're never wrong. Um, so yeah, I mean, you asked the two-word question, but I'll answer it in a slightly different way. Graduating from high school continues to be the greatest day of my life. I've gotten married, I've had children, I've accomplished all sorts of other things. I have a doctorate, but I literally felt like I was being let out of prison. That's how unhappy I was. And never going back to that environment, was sort of the crowning achievement of my life. So that's how sort of oppressive it felt to me. Um, yeah, it was just bad.
Yeah, that's terrible. I taught for 20 years, and my favorite age are fifth and sixth graders, like between 10 and 12. And I remember a teacher coming up to me saying, "Oh my gosh, you have Robbie in your class. All he did was kick the wall, when he would sit at his desk." And I just looked at her and said, "Why didn't you move his desk?"
Mm,
Like, what is that mindset
yeah.
that he needs to conform to exactly what I'm saying versus let's set him up for success. And I never understood that.
Yeah, and I just sent a text message to my golf coach, who was also probably my best teacher. He was a younger guy at the time, taught science and math, and he was the only one who treated me like a normal human being, treated me with respect, wasn't constantly trying to catch me doing something wrong or make me the bad guy. We ended up even becoming friends after I graduated, and we've done stuff with them as adults. Um, and I just told him I was doing good at golf, way too late to help the golf team. Um, but that was the difference too. Just somebody who just did it differently. Same thing in college. My first professor, who just treated us like regular people, didn't
Mm.
have it. We're up here, you're down here. We're the police, you're the criminals. Um, I'm assuming, sort of negative things about you on the front end. And that helped with the self-worth too. I remember it was a writing class and I thought I wasn't good at writing. He offered tutoring, like I think his sister worked there or something, and she was a student, I think she'd do tutoring. And I gave her one of my papers and she's like, "Why'd you give this to me?" I'm like, "So you could tell me how to do it better." She's like, "This is good. You're doing a good job. This is good writing. This is clear writing. You have a..." And so that was the beginning. People treating you with respect, getting some positive feedback instead of just constant sort of negativity and punishment. And I think there are always, I saw that with my kids. My youngest daughter is pretty difficult, and she's a challenge for us. And she had Mrs. Jones in second grade, and everything was better in second grade because Mrs. Jones was a little quirky and a little unusual as well, and she wasn't straight laced and perfect and didn't expect the kids to be, and she sort of got Sophia. She's a little bit of a wild card, so is Mrs. Jones. And then the next year it's Mrs. George, and Mrs. George is, 95 years old and wants to do it the 1950s way, and, would hit the kids if the school would let her, and was super strict and super tough. And that was an awful year. Sophia was the same person. The difference is, the person in the front of the room. And so I think you're right. There's a lot of teachers who do it creatively, or they do it differently, or, whatever that happens to be. I lost you there, Mary.
Sorry, it stopped on me. I don't know why,
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm back. So sorry.
All right. No, that's fine. I could see you and seemed to be working, and I just saw you disappear.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of it is just the overall attitude and seeing it happen within a child when they would go into, you know, Miss Nance's room and have a terrible time and then come into my room. And granted, I made a ton of mistakes as a teacher,
Sure.
but a lot of it was asking the kids what they needed to be successful.
Yeah, I think, what I always teach when I teach about education or parenting is there's a lot of different definitions of good, right? So when the only definition is on time, the only definition is sit still, the only definition is quiet, the only definition is does everything perfectly, and my way is the right way. I remember my middle daughter has a lot of energy, ended up doing gymnastics, and she skipped a grade. She's always been a little different. She's very sensitive, very intelligent, very motivated. And she had a teacher, Mrs. Foster, and Mrs. Foster recognized she had a lot of energy. She let her sit in the back of the class, stand behind her chair, and jump back and forth behind her chair, because even if you don't, Emma's going to be bouncing a leg. Emma's going to be, she would do 4 hours of gymnastics at a night, and that wasn't enough for her. So just that little bit of that, I think what you said is great. And we do this at work. Is everybody's job to adjust to me, or is my job to adjust to them? We do this in relationships. Is it my spouse's job to do things my way, or is it my job to understand their way and find some kind of middle ground? Is it my children's job to please me and do things in the way that I think is right, or is it my job to understand my children and adapt my parenting to some extent? And I think that's those two very, very different ways of doing it. And I think I benefited from the people who were willing to find something good. And I think that's ultimately what I teach. Find something good, even hiding inside of what seems obviously bad. And the people that did that then ended up drawing it out of me. I mean, you talked about self-worth, and I remember a friend of mine who got kicked out of high school, and he read my Freak Factor book years later, and he said, I wish I would have known this about weaknesses also being strengths. He said, because they told us we were going to be failures, and then we started to believe them, and so we stopped doing the kinds of things that successful people do, right? And so that's the danger of the self-fulfilling prophecy. We, as adults, we tell people they're going to fail, then they do and say, see, I predicted it. Maybe you also help to cause it, right? Maybe you help to cause it as well, and we don't like to acknowledge that in our hand in it. I coach a lot of supervisors, and they'll say, it's not my job to babysit these people. And I go, well, it actually kind of is. If everybody just did what they were supposed to do without any help, there wouldn't be supervisors. The only reason there's any supervisors is because people don't necessarily naturally show up and do everything that, sort of needs to be done. So it kind of is your job to understand the person. What motivates them? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they need? Are they struggling with understanding? Are they struggling with motivation? Are they getting feedback from you? Do they know what the expectations are? It is kind of your job to babysit a little bit. So I think that's what teachers do, like you're talking about. They absolve themselves of the responsibility. That person's a bad person. My job is to keep pointing it out
Mm-hmm.
until they change, not um, it's my job to understand what's going on with them and then try to do something in a way that's a little different, not just the natural response of they're frustrating me or angering me or whatever.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I noticed too is like a distracted student was probably super focused on what they wanted to be focused on, like insatiable curiosity.
Yeah. Or super smart. Like that's what it was for
Yeah.
me. And I didn't know it at the time. I never would have called myself super smart. But I got it. You gave me the first example. You explained it. I'm like, boom, done. And then you're like, let's do it 7 more times for the kids in the back. And you're like, I'm kind of
Bored.
out now. I'm done. I can move on to something else. Also, even just the way I listen, I'm a bad listener. So, or I don't look like I'm listening. So I'm better off if I'm doing something else, right? I'm better off if I'm writing. I'm better off if I'm drawing. I'm better off if I'm listening 100%. But
Yeah.
I'm better off if I'm involved. I mean, when I golf, I listen to podcasts, I listen to other things, and you could quiz me on it. I'm playing golf and I'm playing well, and I'm not falling down, and I'm hitting the ball, and I'm keeping score, and I could answer multiple choice test about what did that person say, what was that about, what was that lesson, where did this happen. So I think that's also another thing that we can be better at is kind of understanding that different people learn in different ways.
Mhm.
I had a guy one time in my one of my talks. I was getting frustrated with him because he seemed so distracted, and before I could tell him that he was the worst, he walked up to me and said, I've been on my phone retweeting or tweeting every single word you said for the whole time. I've bought books for my entire team off Amazon. uh, he was the biggest fan in the room, but he looked like a person who had better places to be. But I
Yeah.
was reading it wrong, right? And
Hmm.
I think, that's all I'm encouraging us to do is have a little bit of humility. I tell teachers, parents, managers,
Hmm.
um, we're not great predictors of who's going to succeed and who isn't. So what if we're just a little more humble and a little more tentative about deciding somebody doesn't have what it takes, and then we put more effort into that so we don't cause that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, and I think the thing that kills me with what you've said is that for anybody to tell anybody they're not going to succeed is failing that person.
Yeah.
Um, One person, and she always comes to mind, Ashley Cooper. She is the most brilliant mind I think I've ever been around. And the first thing she told me was that she hated school. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I had you in my classroom, like you'd be the last person I'd call on because I know that you would take everybody's input and formulate it, the information in a way that none of us could think of and absolutely give us a genius answer.
Yeah.
Like I think we just need to accept people don't have disabilities, they're different abilities, and that everybody can teach anyone something.
Yeah, that example you gave is the one I used to show that this concept that weaknesses are strengths, right? I always got in trouble because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. Now I get paid to stand up and talk and run my own business, right? I didn't fix those things. I discovered it was good, just people
Mhm.
thought it wasn't. And so I thought it wasn't. But what you talked about is, oftentimes introverted people are very thoughtful and reflective, which is why they seem quiet and shy. Even if you don't call on them last, even if you just go talk to them one on one later, you'll find that they have insights that are better. And like you said, they incorporate maybe what everybody else was saying. They're not a bad employee because they don't participate. They're not a bad employee because they don't speak up. They're doing something that the talkers aren't doing and that you could benefit from. Again, if you were willing to adjust your approach instead of saying good people speak up in
Mhm.
meetings. Good people are assertive. Good people talk a lot. Good people jump in. I shouldn't have to draw them out. I shouldn't have to talk to them separately. I shouldn't have to. Well, I think that's a mistake, right? I think part of life is, like you said, adjusting and adapting to different. Too often we make different a problem, right? That's why I say that what makes us weird makes us wonderful. What makes us weak makes us strong. Too often we turn different into wrong, different into a problem, different abilities into disabilities, like you said. And that's part of what I try to teach is just that a lot of things are different, not wrong, but we kind of make those synonymous. We also make normal then synonymous with good, and that's a that's a big mistake as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think that, and I'm just going back to my school teaching days, because when I joined the MSP channel, I didn't realize how similar it would be.
Yeah,
The only thing is, I just didn't have a teacher's lounge to go vent.
yeah,
But um, I think that behavior can be a reason, or doing certain things. There could be, you have ADHD, you are on the spectrum. Those may all be reasons, but they are not excuses. Is that we have to learn to adapt to our situations. And I think that that's what we need to teach, kids and those joining the workforce and everything. Is it may not be like the way you want it to be, but how can you make it work too? And how
yeah.
can you set yourself up for success?
Yeah, I mean, I try not, I don't teach a lot of adaptation because I think that's a lot of what people are trying to do, right? You go to school and they tell you, well, you have to adjust to what school requires, right? What I try to get people to do, I call it alignment, which is a form of adaptation, but it's identifying those situations that draw out your best characteristics, right? And so if you're active, how can you find, jobs and work and education that's more active? If you're very introverted and like to work alone, how can you find work that fits? So instead of I need to, become this sort of other person to fit the situation, it's how do I find, and then I even tell stories about people who've started things, how do I create maybe? I mean, I work for myself. How do I create situations that put the spotlight on my best qualities? And that's what's hard about school. School is one kind of situation, then we judge everything about someone's future based on their ability to respond to that. But school isn't representative of all the opportunities that are
Oh
out there for
no.
an adult. And so I don't really have to do anything like I did in school for the rest of my life. And I certainly don't sit in groups and have to be quiet and follow all the rules of the person standing up front and be subservient, just all those kind of
Yeah.
things. So I do think that's one of the big ones is if you don't fit, you know, why and where do you and where would you fit better, and can you find situations that reward you for who you are instead of requiring you to sort of have things about that's exactly what autism, ADHD, there's situations where not only do those not look like weaknesses, they look like powerful strengths in certain situations. And people like that are going to be more successful when they put themselves in those situations more frequently.
No, I completely agree with you. I think the biggest detriment we could do in building a corporation, or whatever endeavor you're in, is surrounding yourselves by people that are just like you. Like, diversity is where the magic is.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
I
mean that's the difficulty. We again, good is normal and normal is like me, right? And so then we look for more of that. But I know, for example, in my work, I'm an idea person. I need execution people. I need detail people. Um, I need something other than me, right?
yeah,
I'm good in one way, but I'm not the only kind of good. So it's seeing, every weakness has a corresponding strength, and that we do best. I call it affiliation. Partner with people who are strong where you're weak. So they're not just different from you, they're like the exact opposite. You
yeah,
know, you're super organized and they're super creative and messy, and you're super structured and a little bit inflexible because you're so organized. Well, if you could team up,
yeah.
you'd be unstoppable. But you're busy hating them because they're messy, and they're busy hating you because you cramp their style.
Yeah, it's like
And
you've got to fill in those gaps that the other person's missing. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah,
Well, I told you that we're going to talk for 15 minutes. It's been 18 minutes, and I could talk to you about this for hours, but I
sure.
just cannot thank you enough for sharing your thoughts, your ideas. And where can they find your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, Audible, every place that you find books. It's on audio version, Kindle. Freak Factor is the one we've basically been talking about. There's also a kids book that's on YouTube as well, so you don't even have to buy it, called Freak Factor for Kids. And then there's a business version of it called Pink Goldfish. So yeah, those are all on Amazon, all on Audible, any place that you buy books.
I love it. Well, thank you, David. And please follow this series and follow David and connect. And I look forward to hearing you speak again.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mary.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye.